Okay. Looks like we're live. I think this is day 7, our 7th live stream with the community, our, I guess, fireside chat, basically the behind the scenes of our weekly discussions. And it looks like I'm having a little bit of internet issues, so hopefully I'm not lagging too bad. Anyway, if you've noticed, we have somebody else with us. Smolk is here, and Scott is here, and Patrick will be here shortly, hopefully. And we are just going to chat it up a little bit and talk a little bit about the project until Patrick gets here. I think Patrick has some specific things he wants to talk about. So Smolk, this is your first time on here, and we were talking a little bit right before this about what your focus is on our project and what you are most interested in. And I asked, is it more the blockchain tech or is it more the gaming side? And you said a little bit about gaming is kind of, it started as blockchain, but then now you're more interested in kind of the design.
Yeah, because as I said, I'm a developer. I'm doing web development a bit. So
Right.
I was interested like how this works from the technology perspective, And then I even contributed a bit, as I remember, into early version of the project.
Yep.
And then as a hobby, I'm researching a bit about game designs. I'm playing a lot of card games. Even the dead ones. So I think this is the most what I'm focusing on right now, and for sure the community.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just out of curiosity, since we're just kind of talking here, what's your so far? If you've gotten into dead card games recently? What is kind of your more? Which one's interesting you the most, I guess? Simply, which one's not your favorite, but like what are you looking at right now from the dead card games? Like, do you have a certain IP that you gravitate towards, or is it just strictly on gameplay?
The game, the spoils for sure. Yeah. So I started with that because I was playing that one for many years. So this is always my favorite and the game that I'm still finding new stuff in. I really wish that I looked into the lore more when it was still alive. Right now, it is harder to find the information about the lore.
So to be fair, it was hard to find information on the lore even when we were publishing it.
True.
Yeah, a lot of it was on the cards themselves, and in the more recent set, we really tried to tie the lore into the artwork and how kind of storyboard it all out. But it was definitely one of the things we wanted to do. We just never got around to. We wanted to do a lot of lore publishing, and at the very end, there was a couple comic book pages or multi-page little PDFs of comics. So there was a little bit there, but nothing compared to what there actually is written kind of in the behind the scenes documents and
what is lost is probably the forums that they were on the old side. So this is gone. This even I cannot use web archive to retrieve it, so that's gone.
Yeah, that made me really sad when Arcane Tinman took down the forums. Yeah. I actually fought very hard against them taking down the forums, and the powers that be, part of my leaving, decided otherwise. They wanted to just erase it all. And it's a shame because there was so much good and valuable information in there, just from a history standpoint, just so much good historical information in there, and ruling information and artwork information. And that actually really boils my blood even today that they deleted all that. But it is what it is. Hello, Patrick. We're talking about spoils with Smolk.
Oh, man. Is this going to be that show, the spoil show?
No, he was just talking about the lore and how he wished that he had played during the heyday so that he could have found more of the lore and more there, because he wasn't as interested in the lore of the game then. And now that the game has died, it's very, very difficult to find lore. And especially after the forums, the original Spoils forums that Arcane Tinman took over from Tenacious. There was all that history from the very first day of you guys launching the forum in Tenacious, from Tenacious launching the forum till right up till the end. And then they just pulled the plug because the new team decided they wanted to start fresh.
So had we put the lore on a blockchain,
right?
A lot of that is my fault. I'm happy to.
It is what it is.
I'm
and
happy
it's
to,
not even that was the discussion, right? Because a lot of that stuff. I mean, lore. We have documents of the lore, right?
Yeah.
There's Bibles and all that stuff and outlines, but there was a lot of discussion on the forums, and lore came out in that fashion as well. So
I wish I can't remember. I was so busy making the art in Singapore for the first 3 sets. I can't really remember. I wrote a whole bunch of bullet points, and whatever lore documents exist were my products. And that was an ongoing ask. Was more lore, and we had hired. We need to hire a couple of writers to try and help, but just nobody could really kind of get it together or sync up. It was much harder than I expected.
Right.
And I remember, multiple times there was concepts that just didn't fit in people's heads. There was one guy out of Florida who really wanted to make comics based on the Spoils.
Yeah.
And
I remember that guy.
kept his whole deal was like kinky, like every single thing was like kinky sex. It was like, that's that's just like that, like that's the thing that happens, but that's not really the point.
Right.
But maybe it is. Maybe I didn't know. Maybe that was maybe see what we've done with not delivering a lore here. So maybe just my nature is to create the promise of a lore and the set of a lore, and then make sure that somehow it never comes together. That's my talent.
Yeah. At the very end, we kind of Ian had helped direct some comic book stuff that was produced, but again, it wasn't very deep, and it really doesn't even do remote justice to some of the concepts in the world.
If I had the property and a whole bunch of time and no need to make money, then I'd sit down and plunk out a couple of Spoils pot boiler novels, because I put a lot of thought into the world of Luridia, and I have a lot of ideas about how, there are to be 3 generations of the kind of Bronze Age stuff we were doing for Seed, and then the quasi Edwardian, and then I wanted to do a kind of futures, which in a way is Volition. And but yeah, for some reason I really got enchanted with that Bronze Age
It's funny
of Seed.
that you mentioned that the third one is going to be a future, and when I was directing, without any of your information in that regard, that was going to be the next coming up set change, and it was more of a reset. So it was not the future that Volition is, which is even more high tech. It was actually a reverse and more low tech, like way back to where robots still exist, but they they're controlling themselves. And but everything's like
post-apocalyptic.
Like, everything's it's post-apocalyptic, jungle-fied, and it was going to be in Gorogidia, because that's the jungle area, So
I love it.
Yeah, it was gonna be kind of fun, but say love you.
Hey, love you. I wonder. I keep meaning to reach out to Michael, because at some point, it's been years, and I know we talk about this every couple of meetings, but it's just like, let's work something out. What are you doing with it?
I don't even know what Michael's doing right now. He's going to school to be a psychologist, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he has the Spoils probably up on his shelf in his study, and looks at it and strokes his beard and thinks, that's the Spoils up there. But it'd be really nice if we could do something. I told you I have my legal theory, since I cleverly arranged to never be paid any money during the whole Tenacious Games experience. So I maintain I was never given my consideration, and that was sold out from underneath me. And I still own the IP, at least that I created, which is all the story stuff.
And you can fight that fight. So it's not Arcane Tinman anymore either, because Michael has exited from Arcane Tinman. So it's him personally.
I know.
It's
his Spoils.
It's his Spoils.
My Spoils.
He won the Spoils. He won it.
He won the Spoils. It should be the goal of every IP to eventually be owned by a guy and then shelved and put in a vault.
Speaking of, do we make that segue to our blockchain?
I don't know. I'm having fun talking about the spoils. let me. I know we've done this before, but I have my stack of very favorite cards. And right there on top is
Toxic Cultivator.
Toxic Cultivator.
Yeah.
Very proud of Skin Suit.
Yeah.
I remember when I first saw Skin Suit, I was like, that is not something you'd find on a Magic card.
That we were really. This was first edition, second release. I think we were really kind of hitting our stride there because the art on this, the rendering on this one is really tight, and I think the storytelling is just super clear, and it was really starting to team creatively. It took about 3 or 4 months of just fiddling around for the team to kind of gel creatively, and for us to kind of figure out the tone.
Cheats McGillicuddy.
Yeah, and I remember the breakthrough card, which I don't think is in my stack, but it's a Warlord card where the guy's going to get run through and they've drawn a target on his torso. And
yeah,
that was like a like, dear me, it's just on the nose, but it took the team a while to kind of get that tone. And then they're off. This is my personal favorite card. I think I've decided of all time creatively because it's so outre.
So that card, mechanically speaking, was very interesting, and there were some very good decks that abused the hell out of that card, passing it back and forth. You could actually pass the card to your opponent, and then there was another card that let you steal it back. So basically, you'd use it, it'd get passed to your opponent, and then you'd steal it back before they could use it. So you could use it every turn without the downside, which is that your opponent gets to use it too.
I'm glad that card got some notoriety.
It got play for sure.
I'm glad it got some eyeballs on it.
Yeah. So did Skin Suit. Yeah.
A lot of these are Warlord cards. Odious Diva, kind of an Edward Gorey homage. Gorey was obviously a huge influence.
Mm-hmm. Was there one faction that sort of wrote itself, or because I remember with the Volition there was a particular faction that just kind of had its own momentum.
Unlike Volition, which was a lot more looser and experimental. I overworked the property for the spoils for like 3 or 4 years. It took us. This is just the curse of entrepreneurship. It took us a long time to raise money. We did raise money. And during those 2 or 3 years, because we started in honestly, must have been mid 2001, and it took us all the way until 2005 for some well-meaning soul to finally write a check. And between that, I've been through another game studio. A lot happened, but I had been just wringing out all the stuff I wanted to do and all the weird little details for all the specific factions. We had the factions way hyper detailed, hyper figured out. I had written lots of card descriptions and just art descriptions and story bits. And so unlike Volition, it was overworked to the point where I had too much vision, and the spoils is everything sandwich, which, I didn't kill any darlings. I just even if it was kind of a half darling, I crammed it in there. And so the challenge with the factions was more marrying them to the art thematically. And the one that gave us the most trouble was the Arcanists before we just decided to rip off Edward Gorey. We looked at all sorts of stuff. I mean, we were looking at medieval Hieronymus Bosch stuff, people with pots and pans on their heads and trying to convey their obsessive craziness.
I remember when I was talking very early on to Dylan Mayo, he said that there was a lot of stuff that got cut just from I don't know if it's from a design standpoint or a flavor standpoint, but there was extra factions and stuff like that, and they were doing weird things that just got kind of nixed. What do you remember about that?
Nothing that we put a bunch of energy into. There were probably some extra bullet points. Dylan, there's probably a bunch of gameplay stuff. He may have been talking more about the mechanics.
Gotcha. Okay.
Dylan really, really wanted a larger furry representation of the property.
Okay.
And I told the story before the Mao, our my mean interpretation. I was like, sure, we could have furries, but they're going to be the grossest, most terrifying take you can. There's going to be no way you could derive any erotic pleasure from
These greedy, jerky, gangstery, money.
Yeah.
hungry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Smock, since you're here, what's some of your favorite spoils cards? What stand out to you?
Definitely Inhibit. I like this one.
Which one?
Inhibit.
Oh, Inhibit.
Yeah.
That's the gorilla carrying the guy out of the cave or into the cave. I can't remember.
Yeah, exactly. The unimportant wizard.
Oh, yeah.
As a Harry Potter fan, this is very fun. I don't remember the name, but it was the caption was I'm melting.
I'm melting.
Was that the one where they're sprinkling the dust and the guy's melt? There is a really graphic melting card. I forget the name of it. It's in Seed. Maybe I don't remember the flavor text. Effervesce or Evanesce or something.
I can't remember. You know what's funny? I just Googled the spoils I'm melting seed, hoping maybe a flavor text would pop up.
Yeah.
The only, obviously I'm getting a ton of Wizard of Oz, but the only spoils card that comes up is ass.
No, not that one.
I know it's not that one.
I'm glad you made that card. The spoils in good hands after.
I did not make that card.
Who made that card?
That's a Josh card.
That's a Josh Lytle card.
Yeah.
That was without me to rein Josh in and keep Josh on a track of good taste.
On the topic, there is also a card with very nice artwork, Department of Rejections.
Oh yeah, that card's cool.
Yeah, with there is an alternate art for this one.
I can't remember which the alternate. Oh yeah, the alternate art. Yeah, that was the thumbs down pushing on the guy. Yeah. The original is the letters being put into the pig's ass.
Yes.
That was an artist series from Chris De Hoya. And boy did he deliver it. The card I was thinking of is called Evanesce. It does not have that flavor text.
Did you see the Patrick Watt, because it's popped up, the Roundalicious Breasticles card?
I don't even. That could be like half of them.
That's another. That's what the card's called. Roundalicious Breasticles. That's another Josh card. But
I feel like there was that time when Josh was left his own devices. I exited hard at the Seed. First release of Seed, so the one after that I think was the first Arcane Tinman, and as you guys probably know, they were paying Josh. They didn't want to pay me, but I love the spoil, so I was doing it on volunteer, but I was getting entirely too much pushback on the Grady piece, so I bailed. But now we have such wonderful cards as Ass and Delicious Breasticles or whatever. So
Roundalicious
Breasticles.
Yeah.
And
we also have Drive-By Boobing. Where they're flashing. That one's me.
See, all this is now Volition stuff. Now that I would have kept the spoilers a little more weird and ambiguous, but the Drive-By Booming sounds like a Volition card.
Also, Pink Kong.
Oh, Pink Kong. So the pink. Okay, just because you're here and you mentioned it, the Ping Conk. He's like a giant 3-armed monster. He looks kind of like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, a little bit. Ping Conk. When I was growing up, my mom made really weird nicknames, and she would always go to my dad and take her hand and hit him up against the forehead and go, Ping Conk.
Ping Conk.
Ping Conk. And knock him up in the head.
Interesting.
And then when I was growing up, she started doing it to me, and then she called me her Ping Conk.
My Ping Conk. Which
is weird. So that became a card. Also, there's a Gearsmith card of like a giant lumbering robot mech, and it's called Lunk Nut. and that's another nickname that my mother came up with.
Luck nut. You luck nut.
You're a lunk nut.
Gosh, I'm a little envious. My mom never made up surrealist nicknames for any of us.
My mom's really weird, so I love
You, hey, you, and the other one. Those were our.
Yeah.
it. You, hey, you, and the other one.
Man, that makes me think of Plod Spinu in Magi Nation. We had solicited art. We had like an art contest, and some kid drew this thing. We didn't know what it was, but he wrote Plod Spinu, PLODSPNEW. Wrote Plod Spinu, and then underneath it, it's meat. And
Let me guess. Was that Matt?
no, some kid mailed in. It was like we opened the envelope, and we had the big stack of like fan art for Magi Nation, and then this kid had drawn like a weird stick figure with Plod Spinu written on it. And you're like, well, that's going in the game right away. It's no pink conch. Ping cock. It's no ping. No ping. It's no ping conch.
I think that's what she was saying when I was growing up. Ping gong.
I could imagine somebody walking around and Plod Spinu or whatever. I don't.
Right.
But ping conch.
Yeah. Yeah. He just wants his mommy.
So it's mommy.
That's his flavor text.
Yeah.
Smashing buildings, trying to find his mommy.
That's good. That's the kind of ambiguous ping conch. That's from the id there.
Let's see.
That's what. Yeah.
So hard to find anything anymore. Oh, there he is. Yeah. Lunk nut.
Trying to think about the presentation of erotic material in comics idiom, because when I was a lad, we had a magazine called Heavy Metal, which was a European import, and that's been lampooned quite a bit. But I think the whole like titties and high fantasy somehow got sidelined by maybe the current fixation on superheroes, which I haven't seen the quiet PG-13 80s idiom type presentation of erotica and any of that stuff. It used to be very mainstream, I think, in a way, because you'd go to any supermarket and there'd be Heavy Metal magazine with big old boobies on it, or you go see Conan or whatever, and you're never far from the titties. But nowadays it's just good, clean fun. Just hyper violence and no titties.
It is interesting to see what Spoils art sort of still makes the rounds. It definitely is either the most lewd or I don't know. I guess the most the majigs seem to have caught on. I guess like everyone like
Majigs were the icon of Spoils.
Mm-hmm.
They became the icon basically.
Yeah, it was very kind of a Heavy Metal idiom of. I was surprised that in the context of a trading card game that was at all controversial to anyone, because again, years of Heavy Metal magazine just seemed like everything we did in the Spoils was really freaking tame. I remember buying the Richard Corbin art books as a kid, and those were as graphic as it gets. I don't know if I still have them.
Yeah, it definitely became some pushback from some stores. I remember it being a hurdle where people were like, I can't have this card game in my case next to the Magic cards when one of the most sought after cards is ass. Or, or Splattergun, that's kind of, 10-year-olds coming in here trying to buy ass and Splatterguns is not ideal. So
that's a fantastic thing. That's
I mean, not for the store. So they don't
psychology working. Like if you're a 10-year-old, it's like, there's a game called The Spoils. This is a card called Ass.
No, I mean it worked in that regard, but it's hard to get stores to stock it.
Well, the cool stores are happy.
I don't know. At least that was some of the pushback. That may have been a vocal.
No, it was, and I had I continued would have pulled back pretty hard on that kind of content.
Yeah.
And I was constantly surprised at how. I shouldn't be surprised because I'd worked in media before, but I was gonna. It's a good thing, perhaps, that I fell by the wayside, because I definitely would have course corrected that.
I mean, towards the end, we definitely reeled it back quite a bit in the last two sets. It was a little bit more traditional,
Yeah.
fantasy, sci-fi stuff. But
And then it died. That's what killed the game.
that's what killed it. Damn it!
That was it, man.
I messed up.
You messed up.
What about mechanically? I don't know if you're going to keep going with this, but in terms of the spoils, was there what was the innovations there, or what was whether it's Smoke or whether it's Ken? What is
a lot of what made spoils unique mechanically and interesting was the ability to have very open, free-flowing turns. And Volition is heavily based on that concept of where you can kind of do whatever you want. There's no turn order specifically where you have to do these things in this order, versus like Imagination was very structured, right? It was kind of the opposite, where it was like very structured. There's very specific order of things, and you're very limited in the types of things and when you could do things. Magic is pretty open, but there are still step structures, and there's still a lot of rules on timing. The rules on, and actually it's called the stack in Magic, and there's literally probably 10 to 15 pages of rules surrounding the stack and layers, something called layers. Whereas in Spoils, Josh was brilliant in how he wrote the rules for that, and it was very simple. And I can tell you right now, it was as simple as you can play a card when it's not your turn, whenever another action happens, essentially, right? It's as simple as if an action is going to happen, you have a chance to respond to that action before anything resolves.
Is that a challenge from a design perspective, like a game design perspective, like, or
it
is it just?
It makes it hard. It can be, because it makes it can make things broken very easily. So the more open the game, the easier it is to design broken stuff or stuff that you can't anticipate how it's going to work, right? So, but Spoils did that. So that was a big thing. The rule set was basically all the rules in like 10 to 15 pages versus Magic's 150 pages. And it was just as deep from a strategy standpoint, if not more so. That was the first thing. So if you get granular with it, the way the resources and the faction cards worked. So the fact that you have a faction card, kind of like Imagination's Magi, and you start with the ability to do something right off the bat, right? Like you can do something right off the bat. Whereas in Magic, if you don't draw the right cards, you literally can't play the game. You draw 7 cards, don't get any lands, you can't play. There's no playing Magic. You have to reshuffle and get a new hand. Whereas in Spoils, you're guaranteed to start with 2 resources. And Imagination, you started with specific cards in your hand and always started with energy. So that kind of bled from Imagination into Spoils. And then Volition has the same thing, where we have our masterminds, and our masterminds allow us to start with, resources. So that guarantees you can start the game, you can play the game. The mulligan in Spoils was much better than Magic at the time. I mean, much better. You basically get to keep the best cards you want, get rid of the worst cards, and draw new cards. Whereas in Magic, you mulligan your whole hand. So you literally can have a shit hand where you can't play. Mulligan, you draw 1 less card, which naturally is going to make it even more likely you're going to have a less playable hand. And so now you're down to 6 cards, and I have no land. So let's mulligan again. I'm down to 5 cards. And it just gets worse and worse. And eventually you're like, well, I'm at 4 cards. I guess I'll sit with no lands. And hopefully I'll draw one the next turn or 2 and not die. Whereas in Spoils again, or Volition, your mulligan rule just lets you stay in the game. You keep the best cards, get rid of the worst ones. And then the decoupling of resource color and cost was huge in Spoils. The fact that you could pay a cost with any colors, essentially. And then there's the threshold system, which Volition uses, that is color specific, right? So you may need 6 lands or resources to play this card, but only 2 of them need to be a certain color. And you don't even have to use those. It doesn't matter what you use to pay for it, as long as you have it in play. So it's like meeting that requirement unlocks the ability to play it. So that made it a lot easier to get cards played, right? So you don't end up with cards stuck in your hand that you can't play for as long. The face down concept, so any card in your hand going face down as a resource helped you meet those higher costs, but they didn't give you the colors. but it gave you the ability to take a card that doesn't work now, whether it's a bad card in the situation, or it's a card I want to maybe use way later that does nothing now. I can play it now and it still does something for me. Being able to pay 3 to draw a card, huge. In Magic, you only draw cards at the beginning of your turn. And unless you draw another card that lets you draw cards, it's 1 card per turn no matter what. So if you never draw a card that lets you draw more cards and your opponent does draw a card that lets them draw more cards, they're going to win the game. Just because they can draw more cards. But in spoils, you can draw shit card, shit card, shit card, shit card. Those could all be resources now, and you're drawing 3 cards a turn, because you have 9 resources out, and you're able to kind of fill up. So you can take an early penalty by not playing anything, and then in the long game, come back because you have a ton of card draw. So that was a huge, there's so many things in the game from a game design standpoint where the game is just superior at every point to the more popular games at the time. And it's not, again, I didn't even design the game, so it's not like I'm tooting my own horn.
Here's the thing, and this is, a classic, entrepreneurship lesson. People really overestimate market risk, I think, and underestimate that risk of the closing the Series A or the Series B, and they don't understand. If you're just a regular Joe and you don't swim in circles of being fantastically moneyed, you don't understand how quickly investors will fold, if the wind's blowing the wrong way, because they've made a bunch of bets. It's a tiny percent of their net worth, and you can be enjoying a market success. And in fact, most games, in my opinion, if they're made with a certain degree of integrity, will find some audience. And the games are very tunable. And you can people think, games are so ineffable, right? But the reality is, through a series of iteration and feedback, you can start to hone in on a good experience. And had we having been through a number of startups, had the timing been different, and had we closed that Series A or B, it would be a different world. And people don't understand the amount of capital either, But as a business case, it's like, hey, we built a superior game. If somebody wants to simply spend the 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars, because at the time I want to say Magic was around 300 million a year, it's like, eventually we can buy our way into this market. After a number of years, we will then own a significant chunk of that. Why? Because we do in fact have a better experience. We can hone in the positioning until it's correct. We started out at this very outre thing, and we can bring that into the mainstream. Run the OP, but it's really just like a we're getting good reviews, the game's getting traction. We were, it's a pretty sharp drop off. We were number 3 behind the World of Warcraft game. Like we had launched a credible game that people were showing up for, and it's just like, okay, now just pour in all the money, just keep adding money, and buy your way into that marketplace. And it's so funny because when we were conceptualizing the venture, it was very much like we saw these games as platforms, right, for people who had to buy into, just like Microsoft might see, the spreadsheet application as a platform. And we're talking about Microsoft buying their way into the mature market at the time and stealing users from Oracle to come over to Excel. And it was very much like, this is the play, right? We're going to build a more streamlined thing. We see what the dynamic is here. And then it's just a matter of lasting until we've migrated enough people over to our platform. So we get this, but it's not a thing that that most investors are really they get it in a software context. But for gaming, I'm actually like, I don't understand games.
Card game.
What are games? Like that's weird hits driven thing. It's like, no, there are people who like to do a thing, and you can optimize that experience and do all the stuff. You can migrate people over to your, game platform. Get it again.
Do they not see the potential though? It's hundreds of millions of dollars in the space, if not $1 billion space.
That's the thing though. It's like when you spend $50 million to get a significant chunk of a $300 million a year market, is the market going to grow? How much would you spend to take players away from Magic and put it onto a different tournament card game? Yeah. And what is that worth at the end of the day? So for them, I think obviously the investors saw the vision, and it's like, that's great, but the stock market is crashing now, and we're going to cut our losses at the $2 million. So thanks.
Right.
hey, good job, guys. The other big entrepreneurship lesson we learned was, yeah, don't try to limp on when you're out of money. Stop immediately. And if you stop immediately, then you won't have liability.
Mm.
And then you don't have to sell your IP for a couple pennies. Then the spoils will be on my shelf.
Ah, rough.
Do you guys want to talk about Volition? Is there a segue?
Yeah.
Man, after rehashing the stuff, so glad we raised $0 for Volition. So glad we did not even try. Because I bet for one of the crypto, pushes, somebody would have written a check, and it would have been a totally different movie. And now Volition will be off on somebody's shelf. Because that's the follow-on thing, man. We've been through like 3 crypto winters.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy we've kept it experimental. I hope that the people who did run mining nodes for the while they were running those nodes don't feel like that was a waste, because obviously there was a cost to that. If you ran your node and stopped, and you're regretting that decision, reach out to me. My focus has been entirely on how do we make it so when we deploy new networks, new mining networks for new projects or for Volition, not beta, how do we get a path to liquidity? And by liquidity, I mean a path to fiat or other crypto. As I shared last time, we spent a lot of time talking to this, I'm not going to name them, and that may come back to life. I don't know, but they have a liquidity as a service platform, mainly for MMOs. And it's just taking a long time. So I've resolved now that we will bridge to other cryptos. We can create a bridge to ERC20. If you have the great fortune to have a pile of Vol, then you will be able to exchange that Vol for a ERC20 token and back. There will be Vol-ETH and Vol, or whatever the currency is for whatever the project is. And then go trade those around on Uniswap or whatever and get it back. Should you do that? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if that's a good idea to do, but if there's a project that makes sense to do that for, you can. It's not something we're gonna, we're not gonna operate any kind of anything for that. That's a totally
right. And the idea is that the vol is not being moved; it's just locked up because it's now being minted on an ETH token, essentially. So it's still technically there. It's just not in the ecosystem.
Correct. It's kind of, so if it's peer-to-peer, we've been looking at a thing called Atomic Swap, and that's a really interesting, multi-part transaction dance that you can do. So if you have chain A and chain B, and you want to exchange assets with another party, and each party's incentivized to complete that transaction honestly, then it's one of those, I can't really do the cryptographic explanation justice, but you kind of record the transaction on chain A, then record it on chain B, then verify it on chain B, then verify it on chain A, and the assets can change accounts that way. The vol for token is interesting because you're basically exchanging it with yourself. Hard to build without an intermediary, but it's on the drawing board. And I want to stress that so this is the other segue. As I've been talking to other cryptos. I had some really interesting meetings with some of the big cryptos in the space. I think they are not quite connecting the whole writing on the wall proof of identity. One of them just went out the gate with proof of authority, and they've always been proof of authority, which is interesting. The others have done stuff like forked EOS and are delegated proof of stake or whatever. But as they go further down the path, they're all having to bring identity in some way, and they're all also starting to kind of back away from we're going to build one chain that's going to solve everything, and everybody's going to run on my chain. So they're all looking at this kind of multi-chain world, which of course what I've thought would be inevitable from day one. It's like we're going to have a bunch of little chains that are very project focused, and there's going to be a bunch of bridges between those, or exchanges to manage those, decentralized or otherwise. Everybody run everything on ETH, everybody run everything on Wax, or everybody run everything on Solana or whatever it is. Just doesn't seem reasonable or necessary or good. So yeah, a lot of the folks
smaller projects just get crushed by the larger projects and their fees and the costs to run it.
Yeah, and as I've said before, the only reason that they have these mega chain thinking is trustlessness. You know, they come up with some hash based on a resource. It's got to be one chain. In a way, going to proof of stake also obviates that. And so even if it's not proof of identity, you still can have through proof of stake a bunch of little chains per project, which is better for everything. Everything's better.
Right.
Though we need a Bitcoin maximalist to appear to argue with that, which maybe will be arranged one day. Anyway, long story short, yeah, there's not. It's going to be a while. So internally, unless suddenly a bunch of money appeared, which is nobody's looking for money, that's probably not going to happen. It'll be a while before anything really happens with Volition CCG. We've talked about a model where we overtly hand that to the community and give a path to liquidity there and see if that experiment works. So that's still on the table. Until then, Volition CCG is hanging out, and one day we'll do something. In the meantime, we're going to focus on building liquidity, bridges to the technology, and probably spinning up a series of smaller projects that are gamified.
So we talked about it yesterday. And I'm just trying to remember, are we still thinking we want to build that bridge on this beta chain or enable it for the beta chain? And so while we're off looking at these other smaller projects, the community that's surrounding that beta chain has a path to liquidity if they want. And then also, obviously, they can still utilize the assets, print the assets, art the assets, do everything that we've been able to do,
Yep.
But they'll also have their path to liquidity.
So that's something that I got to hear from the community.
Yeah.
We neglected this. It's on me, right? At the beginning of the year, we were on the cusp, and I thought we have a path, and then I just kind of I'm waiting weeks and weeks and weeks to hear back, and kind of not doing anything or messaging anything, and we're going to announce something great in a week, and then months go by. So nobody's reached out to me and said, "Hey, Patrick, I mined all these beta assets, and I really want to go shill them on a crypto discords. Please build a path to liquidity for me." We have 2 miners right now, that aren't internal. So we have our friend Sprocket Carlos. Austin is still, I believe, mining. Everybody else has done the math, and maybe they mined all their assets or just forgot to update their mining nodes. But those are the 2 left standing. So it'd be for one of them to come and say, "Hey, no, really, we should keep the beta mining." In our terms of service, we made it very clear. The beta thing is just that. It's a beta.
Looks like Audi Crash is still mining as well.
I am mining for Audi Crash.
You are. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I set that up for him. So I should reach out and say, "Hey, here, just to be sure, here are your assets." Should the distribution of assets plus vol for beta be the go-to market? I don't. If we're handing this to the community, that's up to them. I feel like we learned a lot. I feel like there's still a lot of experimenting to be done with tokenomics. I feel like there's a lot more the platform can do. We've talked about some crazier stuff.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I feel like as identity comes in, I'd love to see people incentivized to self-authenticate by getting grants of vol for doing that, or maybe it increases the amount of vol that's mined as more and more people come onto the platform, more and more vol is eventually available. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to discuss. As long as we're saying, if people want to take the beta chain and run with it and make it and sell it and try to convince people that's the distribution, that's up to them. They should reach out. Am I planning to do the work to bridge anything on beta moving forward? No.
Okay.
It's just work for me, and nobody's saying please do it. So
I was just curious because and we had mentioned this yesterday, depending on how you bridge that asset to an ETH token or whatever, is that something that's universal for any project that can be built using, the cryptocurrency blockchain, or is it going to be per project basis? And
it will be. My entire focus again, unless some coalition of people with pitchforks and torches and money show up, my entire focus is going to be making the platform a bit more generalized, and creating a credible path to either crypto or fiat, so that people who want to hack on it, because there's a lot of that going on. A lot of people out there say, well, what chain should I build my game on?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think you should build it on this proof of identity, chain of the future. And so I want to get ready for that. So let me focus on this. So the answer is yes. That's a key feature.
Yeah.
And that's part of the frustration of the years is it's just got wrapped around the axle waiting for that partnership to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah,
it's all right. It's not like I have investors breathing down my neck.
Right.
Forcing me to do irrational, crazy things.
Okay. So, Volition community, if you need things, you need to tell us. If you want direction, you need to tell us. Not need things as in more programming, but
well, that's it too. I mean, we had a bit of collaboration going. It's just been, I think it's been, if we had primed the pump with a couple $1 million in promotions and art and WizBang stuff, I think it'd be easier for people to be a bit more engaged.
I don't think people realize how much it actually costs. You say a couple $1 million, and people are like, yeah, well, obviously a couple $1 million, you can make anything. And I don't think they realize how much is spent, even just from a time standpoint, and to be able to pay somebody's wages if you wanted to hire a programmer, that money goes away overnight.
That is chump change. I don't think I'd even do it, honestly. I mean, a decade ago, doing a startup with $2 million is a reasonable seed round,
Right.
But today,
not today.
yeah, 5 million is the new 2 million for sure. But no, I get it. It's hard for people to stay engaged. Alexei was making great contributions, and then his country was attacked, and he had to stop. And I hope he's okay. We haven't heard from him for a while.
Yeah, he's okay. I have contact with him.
You have contact with him?
How is he? Is he okay?
Yeah, he is. He is in Poland right now. I'm not sure about his family. I do know that he was working on bringing them to Poland.
Right.
But he himself, his girlfriend are okay, are safe. Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. I remember when that first started, the way he framed that, I almost thought he was going to race into Ukraine.
Right. Rescue.
Yeah, it was for sure hard time for him. I thought that it was tough.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm delighted to hear that he's all right. I've been, since I only know him through this venue, I was real hesitant to reach out because I didn't want to appear, needy. So I just kind of was waiting to hear from him. So I'm glad he's all right.
Yeah, that's very good.
But yeah, powerful collaborator there. If people want to freshen up their projects they're working on, just reach out to me, and I'll be as supportive as I can be, from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
If people want to do their own projects, based on the chain, that'll be a lot of fun to collaborate on. I think it's just the lift of arting all the cards and then committing to the OP for us is a little challenging, but there's probably a lot of smaller projects we can do that'll still be fun.
Yeah, and it's not this sounds maybe doom and gloom, but it's not total abandonment of the project, right? Like not of the Volition card game project. We're not totally abandoning it, or at least I'm not, right? Maybe Patrick is moving on technologically to do other smaller projects, but technologically,
I think it's more of a continued benevolent neglect kind of situation.
Okay.
than a total abandonment. The experiment has always been, can a community, in either a fully decentralized or quasi-centralized, not that I'm a decentralization maximalist at all, but the point of these games is to come together and play and have fun face to face.
Yep.
And can that spring up from a kernel of a community And for a while, we were getting the glimmer that the answer was maybe.
Yeah.
So that's very much the point.
I feel like if everybody that was interested could find another person like them that was interested and just double the numbers, we'd have two Alexis able to program and another Sprocket willing to do some OP stuff, like two, not just one, just double the community. And I think the community could carry itself.
Well, we've said a bunch, having somebody as a community manager, which we haven't ever recruited. A little hard to do when you're not paying anybody.
Yeah.
But we talked. We'll see if Carlos comes back. I know he's traveling right now. But yeah, there may be some model where a Carlos is incentivized and engaged, and it can still happen. So,
well, as the miners, right, you should want to be able to get some of that product into the hands of players, and so the miners are kind of have hoarded a lot of the product. But
we put a prohibition on selling it.
Well, right, but you can use it as a way to incentivize community management, right? Not to sell, but just if you want to bring somebody on as a community helper, they get packs and boxes of product or whatever, So
we all have our theories about how it could work, right?
Sure. I mean, there's a multitude of ways, obviously.
Yeah. Anyway, no, we're I guess it's like status quo, right?
Yeah.
We're not putting any energy onto the publishing, officially, or finding a conventional publisher.
Mhm.
We're just kind of, I'm going to focus on the use case for the tech, because I am actually getting traction. It's easy to have those conversations, as it turns out. Not many people, we call them up and they're like, well, we did an ICO and we have $100 million and we already built a whole online TCG with the blockchain inventory. And so I'm like, but print and play. And, I always still see a mismatch with that. Oh, we built a AAA thing and blockchain inventory. It's like, well, gamers have told you how much they hate that nonsense. And
we never really talked about it, but I go into some of the print and play groups or card game groups or, God forbid, the board game groups, and you show the project and like, oh, that's cool. But as soon as you mention crypto, it's game over. It doesn't matter if it's an awesome print and play game. As soon as you mention crypto, they're just like, no.
I saw a really interesting thing the other day. It was an article about mimetic inoculation. If I say mimetic inoculation, other than sounding like a spoils card, what does that mean to you? Mimetic inoculation. So the analogy they were given was like they had like a bad stick figure drawing of a horse with like backwards legs and like a human face. And you're like, look, if all you had ever seen was this stick figure drawing of a horse, right? And everybody you talked to who knew about horses, like, horses are majestic animals. And then they showed you like, this is a horse. So you're like, what the WTF? It's like, no, the horse looks like that. And horses are majestic animals. Then the moment anybody said anything about horses or majesty, you'd be like, nope.
Right.
Nope. And so they had this kind of economic thesis of like, for any idea that's sufficiently complex, there are a huge number of bad copies of that idea.
Yeah.
That omits stuff or distorts stuff, and you will probably have heard one of those bad copies, and you will then be inoculated against that idea.
Yep.
So the moment somebody appears and says crypto, you'll be like, nope. Or, horses are majestic animals. Nope.
Yeah, well, that's what it felt like. That's definitely part of the issue there in that.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all.
And not our people, apparently.
Well, the deal is, though,
as they are, though. That's the sad thing. And I feel like if there were more people talking about it in a positive light, not even just our project in general, the ones that made sense, you can help fight against that inoculation.
Yeah, even if people were into it, it's one of those deals where, like, that doesn't automatically paint the way for success for our project.
Right.
We've been ahead of, thinking 10 years or 5 years in the future at every piece of this, from proof of identity to print and play. All that stuff is just wildly swing for the fences, visionary stuff. But I will say, many people I'm talking to in places you would not necessarily expect are like, distributed ledger, replication, resiliency replication owned by the community, wherever you draw the line of trustlessness, and speculation and real money gaming. This is the way. This is going to be a way, and people lose their minds because places like Kickstarter are like, yeah, no, we're working on our strategy. There's like, but we hate Web3, and you'd be surprised at the places that are like, yeah, this is the way. So in spite of the bad press, if you're telling me that eventually there can be decentralized operation, and that's a path, then I think people are in it for the long haul, in spite of the protestations, the valid protestations of the few. And it would be real fun. I'm more in the column of crypto skeptics, but it would be real fun to dissect some of the skeptical arguments, because they are so histrionic and they are so bad. Since we're a crypto project, I find myself constantly pulling against crypto dogma, but the skepticism, a lot of it is really, really stupid. And the most outspoken crypto critics frequently say outrageous, obviously false things.
Yeah.
And are just enjoying the notoriety and the outrage and stoking that. And it'd be real fun to the greatest hits of crypto skeptics one day. As much as I myself am also a crypto skeptic. But yeah, it's gonna be a long time. And that's the part of why I want to do smaller projects, is we should just lean in. Like, you know what? The board game people and the trading card game people and all of our friends and print and play who are outraged, have been outraged since day one. It's like, look, if you have environmental concerns, you should be here for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
This should be like, yeah, we don't have to cut down a forest and put it on a pallet and ship it all around the world. And the cost of running a small network of miners to track ownership is negligible. Negligible compared to all of the commons that get thrown in the trash. If you care about that kind of waste, clearly this is a solution. If you say if you're up in arms about artificial scarcity, then why are you playing collectible card games?
Right.
It's just, again, down the hits. Like, these people should be our friends, and maybe one day they will be. But in the meantime, with the smaller projects, we should just hit straight at folks who are into crypto, because that is a form of gaming, and I think most people in that now are doing that with open eyes. I'd be surprised. I think but I didn't know about crypto is far oversold by the critics. I think most people having fun in that space are very self-aware as to the kind of gaming they're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Alrighty.
Cool.
We're at 58 minutes.
I wish I had strong Iron Man. Who's our friend who showed up? Tamara.
Oh yeah.
Tamara wandered in. She had a very valid point. She's like, well, if you're building a system of government, you probably should listen to experts and engineers and scientists, right?
Right.
And I could have done a better job Iron Manning that.
Last week's conversation kind of went off the rails.
It went way deeply off the rails, but it went far enough off the rails that somebody wandered in and had stuff to say.
Yeah.
Oh man, I missed 1 week and you guys just go go tangential.
Yeah.
No, it was good though. It was good talk.
Well, I appreciate. Thanks, Smoke, for joining as well.
Yeah.
I really appreciate.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. You got any insights? You got anything you want to say?
Not for now.
Fair enough. Well, on that note, I think we will push to next week, right? And yeah, I think next week will be it.